Today, I'm Buddha. And what is this internet thing? It's fascinating. How are you doing?
Hello, how are you?
Good. Namaste.
Namaste.
Yes. I would like to introduce my audience to an amazing person who, I have learned a lot from you. You have the amazing ability to connect people, and I hope that I can get where you are at because I don't have that ability yet. I'm still learning. And that you have this ability to be able to I don't know how you do it. It's like I don't know if you're afraid or not, but when you tell your story, it's very fascinating how that you're very vulnerable and not many of us can do that yet. I'm still trying to. And so I'm gonna read her bio, even though I'm not good at intros. About the author. Get her new book. Oh, congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, The Unbecoming.
Unbecoming. Dr. Renee is an educational psychologist. We can all be one if we want to say that. Associate professor of educational psychology and owner of Transcendent Heart Life Coaching. Dr. Renee is leading researcher and expert in emotional regulation, management, and recovery after trauma. She has published articles in the area of teacher emotion regulation and emotional department of children and adults. How are you doing? Good. Can you tell me about your adventure on writing your book?
Well, let me say that this journey into writing this book has been about 2 or 3 years now. And it started out as an entirely different book. It started out as a self-help book, and it was originally called A Journey Within. And I was being very open and vulnerable and transparent about many things that I call the critical 5 in my life, and felt that that would be really helpful for people. And no matter what I kept doing in writing that book, it just kept dying out and dying out. I either got bored with it, or I lost my way, or I became emotionally distressed in writing it. And so I knew that I had to step away from it and allow time to kind of evolve, and it would show me what I needed to do. And then I finally got to last year, and I realized that's what I did. And I'm a sci-fi fantasy lover, right? I love sci-fi shows, sci-fi movies, things like that. Cool. If I could write all of that, 5 chapters in my book, and be able to talk about it from a more abstract, surreal kind of place, because I feel like, and I was interviewed yesterday too, and the woman asked me something about the book and why I chose to write it that way. And she even said, I think that people can find their way more through metaphors and surreal interpretation versus here's A, B, and C of what you should do every single day, right? And so the journey was really telling my story, but telling it from a place that was far more entertaining, for one. And it was far more exciting to write because I truly found more of my own serenity and my own peace in writing that book that way. I really unbecame, as my book's whole purpose is to do, right? I kept critically unbecoming after every chapter that I wrote in that book. Chapter 4 was the hardest to write. That was the one I had a meltdown. I literally had a meltdown writing that chapter. And I walked away from it and I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And I was getting ready to go back to India the first time around. And I remember telling my partner and everything, I was like, I can't do this. I just can't write this anymore. And so it really has been quite the journey of really coming to a space of my own growth. And from people who've read it, have shared with me that it's really touched their lives too.
Well, as I read it, it gave me goosebumps.
Aww.
The one that's for a spiritual one, but I mean, I wrote it somewhere, but I dog-eared it so I can remember where I can put it. But it's very fascinating. But you put it in a character it made me want to do my own, not kind of because most of the self-help stuff is like you're right, technical. And so I want to
yeah. And it's all the same, right? Yeah. It's like the same thing over and over and over again, just from a different author. Yeah.
And then I think that we get tired of that so many times. That's why I try to. It's very tiring when you see something and you want to change it a little bit. That's why I very appreciate what you say to me, though I don't know what you mean by that. Keep the passion for reading alive, keeping up the imaginary work. You're transforming a generation. I love that. Thank you. That's
You're welcome. And you've always, through all your videos, demonstrated such a love for books, a love for reading, a love for knowledge. And, you've been open and transparent about your own struggles in school. And so, someone like you is such a pivotal person in this media, right? In this medium that we have here, a video, to be able to reach younger generations and get them passionate about, things that maybe they wouldn't traditionally read. Like my book, probably is geared more toward an audience of, upper 20s to about,
oh no, you're cutting out. The one part, because yeah, after we've been cutting in and out, I've been trying to. Oh no, I lost it again. Where I got the goosebump. I love the part where it's where you saw it. Her dad was silent, but their eyes met, and Liv knew this was definitely her dad. Why aren't you talking to me? You know how like I imagine it's almost like when you wrote this. Did you imagine like it was like an astral projection or something like that?
Yeah. It was all based on astral projection, time, and time holes, things like that, all over the place. Things that I've been infatuated with, and trying to incorporate, but from a very subtle nuance. I didn't want to like come out crazy. Like I grew up loving Fringe, right? Like that was a show that I loved as a teenager, right? And so that was something for me that I wanted to figure out how to bring in all of these multi-dimensional things, not only just third and fifth dimensional, but I mean like 11th dimension stuff too, right? And so my second book, which is In the Knowing, is actually going to be 7 chapters based on the 7 chakras and aligning with further dimensional sort of growth and ascension and those kinds of things. And then the third book is going to be 13 chapters, which is going to be the ultimate challenge of coming to a sense of oneness, with oneself, and what does that sort of entail, and how do you get to that space? So yeah, it is inclusive of all of that. I'm glad you picked up on that. So
Yeah, I mean, well, it's because when I read your book, I use my imagination. I use a lot of imagination because I feel like because I'll be rereading Napoleon Hill book, Think Grow Rich, about imagination, because I feel like every time I get a creative idea, it's about like it come out of nowhere, and I felt like why does it keep coming out of nowhere, and it's connecting to the source, and I was reading it, but. The part got me where you got the sword though. You got the sword.
Chapter 4, yeah.
Oh my God. I was like, oh yeah, she got the sword. Just going to battle.
With the 3-headed monster, right? In a way, and the 3-headed monster represents the 3 enemies of my own life. The things that I've really struggled with, self-doubt and fear, those kinds of things. And as you notice in the chapter, she's unsuccessful in her initial attempts, even with the sword, right? She's really unsuccessful. And that chapter is representative of the destroyer. The destroyer is the guide, right? There's a guide in each chapter that sort of meets Liv and helps her along her journey into unbecoming. And the whole book is based on the synchronicity of 555, right? The 5 chapters, the 5 guides, the 5 elements. And in that, the one thing that she recognizes is her needing to be this warrior sort of persona all of her life, which I had, right? I grew up with this, you can be anything you want to, here we are, women roar, women can be whatever, you can kick ass, you can fight, and learn to be really, really problematic in that way, that I was always fighting in my life to really kind of achieve and do the things I wanted to. And I'm now at that space and time that I don't want to fight anymore, right? I don't want to fight. I want to be able to move effortlessly through life now and give back and do the things that I need to do. But she was struggling with her own fears of her health issues. She had fought cancer. She had the fear of it coming back. Her dad had died of cancer. You know, she sort of kept seeing herself in the image of her father versus seeing herself in the image of herself. And the guide in that chapter, The Destroyer, is a symbolism of Lord Shiva, right? And so really bowing to Shiva and really giving him grace in that chapter was really important for me, because he's become a really integral part of my own spiritual growth and things like that. And he really helps her. I think he kind of gives her a little spiritual spanking, I sort of joke about in that chapter, of getting her to look at herself and really see who she really is. That chapter was the one I had the breakdown in. That was the one I had the meltdown and struggled to finish. That was the hardest one for me.
It's really interesting how did, because I knew that it was you in it, but how did you come up with the name Liv?
Well, that's my daughter. So my daughter Olivia, that's her nickname, and I have been watching her now for 9.5 years of her life, and I am in awe and have a sense of reverence for this young lady, because she is everything that I tried to be when I was little. It makes me teary to think about it. I always cry. Don't I cry in lives? I cry in videos. It's who I am. But she is a powerhouse, but at the same time, she does it with grace, and she does it with, you know, this quietness to her introversion, and she's just so beautiful. And I remember, you know, years ago when I decided I didn't want to have kids, right? I was like, I'm not having kids because I didn't want to bring these innocent souls into the world to struggle with the anxiety and the panic and the depression that I had for 20 some years. And, you know, I decided that maybe it's best to just stop the gene pool here. And, you know, and I got to a place in my 30s that I said, no, I think my purpose is to bring children into this world for some greater thing. And I'm so blessed that I did, because while I feel that I certainly am a benefit to her life, I know she's far greater a benefit to mine. And so there was no other character choice than my daughter. You know, she is just the epitome of a goddess, for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think somewhere in your book you did mention introversion, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also I want to mention that too many men out there are like, because I disagree with my friend, because we were playing game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And because most of the entrepreneur I look up to are also women. From the one who created Huffington Post.
Mm-hmm.
She's amazing. And I disagree with him, because he's all about power, and he thinks that men should be like, they should be the one who, entrepreneurship, whatever, or dominate. But I disagree, because that most people, what was it, Sandy Gallagher, and most women are doing beautiful things into the world as you are, right? And I wanted to disagree with him, but I couldn't do it.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I literally was interviewed yesterday, and this is what I was talking about, was the aspect of the divine feminine. And that was a really big part in chapter 3 of my book, when I meet Lucina. And Lucina is modeled off of Luna, the goddess of the moon, right? And so she is the one who takes me back to my roots, takes me back to Iceland, takes me back to the land of my mother, to be able to see her as a young child. My mother had faced abuse as a young girl and things like that. And I get to retell the story where I actually kicked that guy's ass a little bit in chapter 3, right? Spiritually, which I loved, with my foot on his neck and, you know, the sword pointing at him. There's me getting out all the things that I wasn't able to do to protect my mother because I wasn't around when she was little, you know, but if I could, what would I do metaphysically? That's what I would have done. And so, you know, it's so fun to look at the misunderstanding of the divinity of the masculine and the feminine energy. And we are all both. None of us are void of any of it. But sometimes we get into the duality and the polarity of finding ourselves far too one way than the other. And, you know, women traditionally, if we go back to ancient times, were the leaders, were the rulers, were the ones who held the power, and did it with grace, right, and dignity. And men were in lesser roles, right? They were made to believe that they were in more, and we're sort of moving back to that now. We're seeing women just catapulting and elevating and elevating and elevating, and men are either, you know, really wanting to go along for the ride, or they're fighting it. And that's the old patriarchy, right? That's the old paradigm of the men who oppressed us for so many centuries. And that no longer is acceptable in this age of Aquarius. We're not going to take it. And so it's interesting to see some men really struggling to move into that because they feel like that they're losing their power. And in a way they sort of are, but it's not in the way that it would be. You know, we're not looking to turn the tables of oppressing men. We're looking to turn the old oppression paradigm into a system of really coming together as one, you know, because gender is an illusion, right? I mean, really, when you get down to it, we're all one. We're all a soul. You know, what we are biologically and physically is very different from what we are on a spiritual level. So this is where those issues of man, woman, you know, gay, straight, all that stuff almost becomes, you know, difficult for people because they see too much of what we are in our body versus what we are in our soul. So yeah, so that was fun to write about in the book for sure.
I get the sense that you really do enjoy writing this book. I can
Oh my
see
God, I loved it. Yeah. It was a journey. And you know what? I have to say though, even though it took me a year to get to writing, I literally wrote these 5 chapters in less than a month. And so by the time I sat down and started clicking those keys and, you know, I was having conversation after conversation after conversation, you know, with my writing coach and life partner and love. And, you know, he was talking me through things as I was telling my story, and he would put it together in some spiritual spin as the, you know, beautiful Hindu that, you know, that he is, and being able to help me kind of, you know, put those pieces together. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. Book 2 is even more fun, but it's quite the challenge. It's quite the challenge because now it's turning the table of Liv unbecame, but how does she stay in the knowing? How does she just be in that centered space when all the storm and all the chaos is still existing around her? How does she stay without becoming something else again or losing her way? And the first couple chapters are a little scary, I have to tell you. So they're not going to be for children this time around. There is going to be a little bit more, you know, severity of things and things like that. But it's fun. It's fun to tell this story.
when you come up with the story, like the pieces together, how do you see it? Like, because I
Yeah.
want to see it. I want to. Yeah. Do you like picture it, or how do you come with it? Like,
Well, having been an intuitive, clairvoyant, and empath all of my life, I've always had, you know, energy that has always sort of come to me, even from the time I was really little, right? And I used to be afraid of it when I was little. I didn't know what it was. I was like, oh my God, these are ghosts. These are this or that. And then, you know, growing up and starting to really harness that energy and realizing this was the universe's way of speaking to me and giving me ideas and lessons to be creative and of service to other people. And so I always get these images in the form of, you know, whether it's gods, goddesses, angels, fairies, you know, these things that just sort of come to me energetically. And so what the book sort of did was there were these images I had in my mind, even though book 1 doesn't have any pictures in it. Trust me, I wanted to, but there was no time. And so, you know, the reprint of book 1 will, and book 2 already has, you know, someone doing illustrations and things like that this time around. But it really is about having the images of what these characters were like. And when I had the characters in my mind, I could see me as Liv living out this story. And it was just all coming to me very visually. And so I would just in my mind start to see it as almost like, you know, an old movie, you know, like where you would crank it and you would see the film just kind of moving. That's what my brain was sort of doing. It was just creating these visual images in which the story just popped. I mean, it just came out. And then there were the conversations between Liv and especially the man at the end. You know, that's the love of my life. He and I literally had that conversation. And so it was really, really poignant that it kind of had to be in that book. And so it's a combination of all of that, right? My crazy, creative, you know, out there kind of mind amidst a really practical, real conversation and my life unfolding in front of my eyes.
when it comes to would you ever turn this to comic?
Oh, that would be fun, honestly. I was thinking because, I have a love of India and I'm going to be spending lots of time there now. And I'm getting ready to go back, soon. And I'll be back in the fall for quite some time of my sabbatical from the university doing some work. And I love Bollywood. I love Bollywood. And I could just see trying to create some aspect of something amidst this story into a Bollywood story. I think that would be so much fun. How I will do that, I have no idea yet, but because I want to be respectful and truly authentic of the country of India that has been so good to me. But, try to figure out how to do that in a beautiful yet more peaceful, maybe cathartic kind of comic kind of relief way. We'll see. I don't know. I haven't really planned it, but I did have that thought at one time.
Okay, yeah, because I was because your book inspired me to like not do like a self-help thing, but like more like a Japanese manga type of way. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I want to break because back in 2012 when I was in my inward depression, I quit my job at working at a restaurant. I started drawing, and I felt like this sense of like I remember I was drawing, and I had this sense of like, damn, I wish I could make this into a manga.
Uh-huh.
But the reality is, people say it can't be done, and or people, adults, society these days have this sort of limitation that I dislike, or I would say I hate, because it's disgusting. Because I talked to my friend, and our worldview is very different. I mean, he get to see his worldview, but I get to see mine. But I felt that there's something that I believe that can happen. So your book make me like imagine all the possibilities that I can
Good.
do. That because I wrote it down where I wanted to do. Where like yourself, you talk about India and Hinduism. What was it like to travel to India? Well, what
Oh,
did you experience? What did you see?
magic. Magic. And I'm telling you, I was told that this place would be a place of everything and nothing. And that's why chapter 4 is called Nothing
Oh,
is Everything.
no, that's why it was okay. I was like,
Yeah. And it is. It's such a chaotic place, right? When you think about India, it is that. I mean, traffic, horns blaring, colors, smells, every aspect of your senses is just taken over in the immediate sense of this country. And you can get overwhelmed quite easily. But it's also such a place of people who truly understand how to go in, right? And how to be quiet and how
wow,
to find peace amidst that chaos. And so, no matter where I was, no matter what I was doing, right, I always felt safe. I felt peaceful. I felt like I had been here before in a way. Ever since I was really little, I had always had a desire. I even had a doll from India when I was really little. I'd always had a desire to go to India, and I didn't know why. I had no idea back then. And things kept showing up in my life about India and things like that. And I even dated a guy from India when I was a teen. He was in my high school. His mother didn't like me, but anyway, it was interesting because I said, God, I've always loved this culture, but I just sort of didn't see myself in what my purpose was until just this past year. And now I have thousands of followers from India alone and my followers on Instagram. I'm actually helping a lot of people via coaching because in India, there's a stigma still regarding mental health.
hmm.
And it is due to a lot of different spiritual belief, of how one comes to that sense of knowing. They're not all subgroups of India are fans of traditional psychology, right? They kind of see it as taboo. And it's a struggle, right, for people who find themselves needing that traditional method or model of mental health to be able to step into that in the country, because most people say, no, just go and study, just go and be by yourself, just go and pray, just go and do this. And they've tried, but there's a lot of young people today with very high levels of anxiety and depression that I'm actually getting the gift of being able to work with. Obviously it's secret. Their parents probably don't know that they're working with me. I don't even, require them to pay me most times. It's really just beautiful work that I feel like I'm doing for them, because, you're talking about a group of individuals who still live in a very male dominated patriarchal society where women really struggle with power. And that was very evident in my trip walking around the streets of India and seeing men sitting in tea houses and socializing and, running around and doing whatever. And very few women were ever in those atmospheres. I was like, where are all the women? Oh, they're home, or they're with their children, or they'd be in the markets. And yet we have this image as Americans about Indians being the forerunners of, technology and society and, right, highly educated, and they are. But many women will go into the traditional, marriage, which is still arranged, and, go ahead and accept that for their life and walk away from their careers and things like that. But there's some that don't want to do that. They don't want to be a product of that anymore. And so I'm not pushing my Western ideals, but I recognize the power I have as an American woman, and I'm trying to use that gracefully in a way of helping maybe those who want the help to be able to find it. So it was amazing. I go back, pretty soon. I'm headed back, and every moment of being there is just full of bliss for me. So.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I was thinking about, wow, like you're absolutely right. The traditional marriage or whatever that's why I love Vision. He created the extraordinary code, Vision, Lakani.
Mm-hmm.
He talked about he don't want to go by his tradition of Indian marrying other Indian.
Yeah.
Because it was painful for me, actually, when the moment my ex-girlfriend, she was born in India, Nepal, and she told me, I love you, but I cannot marry you because you're not Indian.
Yeah,
That was
right.
that was the most painful. You know, at first I hate being American, but then I realized I love being American because it gave me the ability to say, you know what? The tradition of Asian countries, like the thinking must die, but the culture and history must preserve. But we somehow can fuse these ideas, like for American, to fuse it. Because I feel like if you go to extremes, or because I was listening to Greg, it's not about balance but harmony.
Yeah. Integration.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and American people, because I disagree with my friend, because he was talking about how it's America. You pronounce how American people pronounce it. No, that's killing the. I see so many Asian people who was born in America. They have lost touch their way of. They don't. Their parents doesn't sell them on how to speak the language anymore. Because I tried
Yeah.
to talk. Because I tried to talk to. I was working at a store, and I tried to talk to the kid because his mother is like talk to him in my language, and it was really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know many parents here in the US who, are from China as well, who did not teach their children the language. And so now there's this cultural gap, right, between grandparent and grandchild. And also just being bilingual, trilingual is such an asset today, right? In any way, shape, or form that, I wish, I'm over here trying to learn Hindi in my 40s, and it's quite the struggle, let me tell you. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to do the best I can, because I don't want to be that traditional American who expects everybody just to speak English to them no matter where they are in the world. I'm far more understanding and sensitive to the need to also be able to show respect for one's culture. So I'm doing the best I can. But I think that, yeah, there is something to be said that, again, this is that idea of duality, that we are all different when we actually aren't, and down in the soul level, down in our DNA, down in the cellular level, we are all exactly the same. And, if we can get out of these labels, as the book sort of tries to get us to look at, let go of the labels, let go of the titles, let go of what you think you're supposed to be, get to the core of shedding those layers of what you became because of your mother, what you became because of your father, what you became because of your grandmother, your school, your society. Let it all go and get to the core and the essence of who you just are. So who was Liv, right? Who really is Renee? And on that spiritual soul level, and just get to that, strip down to the rawness of that and look at that, and then just stay there. But it's not easy. It's not easy to do because we're taught that we're supposed to be going somewhere, become something, right? Acquire some stuff. And in actuality, that's the shit that causes suffering for most of us. And so when we let all that go, what do we end up with? Us. Well, it's quite peaceful. Quite peaceful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what also caused all the anxieties and all the insecurities.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many
Exactly.
adults have. Yeah, because one of my neighbor, he was putting his fear. So many times, people put fear on you because of
Yeah.
what they have back in the past. And I was like, no, because I'm a nice person and I usually don't stand up for myself. I'm a pushover and
Mm.
I don't usually talk and communicate.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know what? This is not how it is. Something must change. I feel like something must change because the way that we're going, because how do you deal with all the, because your past have lot to why you do what you do. Like you have been so much like tough time and painful experience. Why you do what you do? Why you do it for people?
Yeah, it's a great question. And honestly, I tried to run away for a long period of time. Psychology tried to pull me in for so many years before I even let it look at me. I was like, no, I'm going to be an engineer. I'm going to be this. I'm going to be that, and I kept going into these programs and being completely unhappy. And yet people would always say to me, you're very good with people. You should work with people. You're such a great communicator and a listener, and you're so empathetic. And I said, yes, but I'm full of anxiety and I'm full of fear and I'm full of self-doubt. I'm a fraud. Why would I possibly want to be a counselor, a psychologist, a teacher? What would I be able to give to somebody? And so for me, I finally had somebody say to me, your greatest gift to this world is what you hide from the most. And
Huh.
that kept in my ear because I thought I was supposed to be what I love the most, not what I hid from, right? And so, yeah, there's a way of cultivating both of those because I certainly didn't love psychology. I didn't love anything about the idea of going into a field of having everybody come at me with all of their issues when I had 1,000 of my own. What if I melted in front of them? What if I got angry at them? What if I couldn't do this work? Who was I? And so the more that I started training and the more that I started working, because I started with children and adolescents and school-based, areas. And so the more that I worked with students, the more that I saw them connecting with me and finding relevance in my story and who I was, even if I didn't look like them, there was still this really beautiful bond on a spiritual level that they got me and I got them. And so I knew that I had to tell my story, but I had to do it in a way that I could release my story at the same time. Many of us tell these stories and we just hold on to them. They're our story. We've been hurt. It's our story. We don't want to let it go. And I wanted to be a greater product in this world of helping people tell their story, but then release it, shed it, let it unbecome, and become what you're supposed to be in this present moment today. And so I do the work because I know, having been through the trauma of my dad dying, facing my own cancer, watching my mom struggle in her own life because of the abuse she faced as a child, growing up poor, also having all these self-doubts, even though being a successful student, nothing was good enough, right? Perfectionism, that kind of stuff. What were all these things that I struggled with? How could I help other people realize their gifts too and not be afraid of it? And so that's why I do what I do.
It seemed like it's always a recurring theme that the most people who have the most pain always try to help other people who are going through that level of pain. How did you deal with cancer? Did you use any type of how did you deal with that?
Well, it was really scary, as I share in the book, relatively early on, that I remember getting that phone call, and I remember hearing those words, you know, this is not just some typical abnormality on your skin. This is literally melanoma. And do you know what melanoma is? And do you know what this means? And I was like, I hadn't a clue, you know, I had no idea. My dad had lung cancer. I knew what that was. I knew what that looked like. Was I going to have to do chemotherapy? Was I going to have to do radiation? What was I going to have to do? And fortunately for me, mine was very surgical, right? I didn't have to do, you know, those kinds of things after, but it was a constant watching and being very vigilant, having a large part of my leg removed, and having to become very comfortable, you know, with the abnormality of what I look like compared to other women, and being insecure, and, you know, things you took for granted, like I never wore shorts again. I never wore a bathing suit again. I did, you know, I felt really insecure, and it sounds very shallow, but it was, I was scared of the sunlight hitting my skin. I was scared of, you know, would I get cancer again that way? It wasn't, I was worried about what people thought of what I looked like. It was a fear of that. And then I did get some tumors that came into my kidney after that. And if you know anything about melanoma, melanoma is a type of cancer that will consistently spread in different parts of your other organs in your body after you've had it. And so for me now, it's constantly having to be vigilant and have my kidney checked and looked at other things and make sure that it's not coming back in other parts of my body. So, you know, it's just that kind of stuff. But that was scary because.
Okay. Okay. I think, okay, we got off to your cancer.
Yes.
So I was enjoying that when you storytelling. Can you explain? I don't know which one we started. You got the phone call.
Oh, yeah. And so, you know, it just became really frightening for me that I was going to have to face the same plight that my dad did, right? And die from cancer really young and lose his family and, you know, have to go away and, you know, leave us all behind, which is what happened. And so when I got the news, I was petrified that I too was going to succumb to cancer the way that my father did. And that wasn't what was my reality, right? I was letting my father's reality become my reality, which wasn't my truth. And so I had to learn to unbecome that I was carrying around his story of his death and his cancer, and that mine didn't have to be exactly the same, and that I could create a different reality in that, regardless of whether I was going to pass away or not. I still could live a life without fear and without worry every single day of what was going to happen, versus learning to really stay in that present moment. So, you know, that's what that chapter really is about, is how do you unbecome all of your fears about things that you can't control, right? That are completely out of your control.
Yeah, what you said is true. We have this fear about our loved one have, you know, pass on, and it's scary sometimes. It's because I know where you come from, because I had a fear when I was in the really major depression. I was scared to die.
Yeah.
Because one of my friends, he has, I know him since elementary school, and his dad died of a heart attack. I was so scared of dying of a heart attack, and that become my reality.
Yeah.
And when can you pinpoint what you mean by unbecoming? How can you unbecome?
It's a very spiritual quest, right? It really is about letting go of all the dogma, all the preconceived notions, recognizing where your story isn't your story, but that you're actually living out the life of other people, such as your parents or grandparents, things like that, that have all become intertwined within you. And the process of unbecoming is the process of surrendering, releasing, and letting go all the things that aren't serving you, all the things that aren't of you. And we as children succumb to the stories of our parents, the legacies of our parents, the fears of our parents, right? We end up becoming certain ways, certain things that really weren't destined for us. They weren't part of our path. They weren't part of our dharma. But because our parents are the ones who are living out those lives and in positions of power for us as very young people, we often just adopt those things without even really realizing it. We become socially constructed based on what their realities were, and society, what it tells us to be as a man, a woman, you know, this or that, versus what was really written in the stars for us, what was really our true dharma, our true calling, and how do we learn to let go of all that other stuff so that we can make room for what was really our purpose. And that's what the unbecoming is all about. Letting go of all those things that are not you, letting go of all those things that weren't meant for you, and all those things that won't take you to where the ultimate goal is, which is ascension, right? To be one with your true self. So that's what the unbecoming really is.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I feel like every time when we go on our own path, I feel like we're going closer to our oneness with in ourselves and with this connection with the source. Because that's all the book that tied in together, right?
Yeah.
All the I feel like every time when we go toward our journey, we're like it brings us closer back to home, intuition, all the what we have forgotten to use over time. People don't use it.
No.
How do you deal with people, in your field, psychology and stuff? How do you deal with that, explaining them that it's gotta?
It's a mixed bag, right? I mean, it's a mixed bag. There are many people from very traditional, empirically based forms of psychology that, drive their lives based on data. And then there are many of us who know that there isn't always a need for data. Sometimes there are things that just are. You see them in front of you. You see them, you see miracles, you see things happen. We can't necessarily explain why those things are present, but it is an idea that energetically there are things that are just before us that we don't really always have to try to figure out why. What people are really yearning for is, how do I get to a sense of oneness within myself to be who I am meant to be, so that the ultimate goal, which is to die someday and not be reborn to many people, right? And descend to that space of true spirituality. How do I do that? And, someone telling me who I am every single day or what's wrong with me or these kinds of things isn't going to always get me there. It's just going to keep reminding me of who I was and my struggles, and it might keep me stuck. And so there's this space now that exists that we call intuitive psychology that people are really yearning for, that you help people recognize their own energy planes, their own paths, their own desires in a way, and also what was written in the stars for them long, long ago, and help them get back on that path and help them find their own space amidst their own energy. It's not telling them what to do. It's not telling them how to do it. It's just helping them, once they've steered off of that, get back into alignment with themselves, with source, as you said before. So yeah, a lot of people don't get it in traditional psychology. They don't like it. Because again, they can't measure it. There's not an N, there's not, statistically significant standard deviation. There's not this, there's not that. And so they get really, really frustrated. But I see intuitive psychology becoming really, really popular in the next 10 or 15 years.
You are so right. It's because the reason why I asked, because it's hard to get across, right? With people who are trying to data so much.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's so hard because I try to explain to this thing where, like, you can't just always fit, because I like to when circumstances happen, I like to find, like, why did this happen? It's kind of fun. It's because you make you curious, right? But when it comes to my friend, he's like very analytical, right? I am too, but like data, and it's so hard to get through to him. No, but I was like, it's not easy, because I was thinking, how do you bring across that message for them? But I don't know, man. That's kind of hard.
Yeah, everybody has to come to their own, right? I mean, that's not our purpose. Our purpose isn't here to convince anybody of anything. Our purpose is here to stay in alignment with ourselves and stay on the path of what we are here to do. And so the more that we do that, the more we stay in alignment with our true purpose. And the less we feel offended, vulnerable, irritated, or the need to have to sort of alter others. Because when we're in true oneness of self, we'll feel very confident and comfortable in where we're headed, and know that those that aren't quite awake it's just not their time yet, right? And they'll get there. They'll get there in time. And the more that we do our work, the more we call in people who are like ourselves, as in the book, you know, Liv continued to find these guides who knew exactly what she needed and what she was like, and didn't judge her for anything about her, but knew her as her true self. And she was the only one amidst this entire story who didn't know who she was. Everybody else, those 5 guides, already knew who she was, saw her for who she was. She just didn't. She had a hard time doing that. And so that's, you know, the ultimate space that we all want to get to. So
It seems like you have grown a lot. You feel like you have grown a lot?
in writing this book, or just in general?
I mean, as a whole, like your
Oh
journey.
God, yeah. You know, and it's funny because some people keep telling me, they're like, every time I see you, you look younger and younger, and yet you're getting older, right? In the metaphysical body of the way of aging, you know, but every time I see you, you look younger, you know, and yet I feel like I've evolved centuries and centuries in such a short period of time. I'm actually at a really interesting space right now. I'm probably in a really difficult growing pain part again in life, right? I've faced this a couple times in life, so I'm not scared by it by any means, but it's overwhelming because I am truly unbecoming, and I am now moving into this next phase of life, of which I am now supposed to be really getting into that space of staying here as one, to be a mentor, to be a model for other people, versus being consumed with my story anymore or what's going on with me. And so it's been interesting to not get lost amidst that, because it feels heavy, right? It feels really heavy at times.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like, like
yeah.
I said, yeah, you don't know, like, yeah.
Yeah, it's like depression, right? You feel the same way. You feel heavy, you feel vulnerable, you're crying, you're kind of losing yourself at moments, and you're like, oh, what's going on with me? And you know, everything feels out of sorts. And it is. One, we're in Mercury retrograde right now. It's understandable. Two, we're in this beautiful place of transformation as a world, right? No one can escape this anymore. And we're really needing to get in alignment with each other in that beautiful space of energy. And so that's where I'm at, and that's where I'm hoping to stay for the next 20, 25 years, you know, and be at peace here for a while. And then I get to grow up and be a curmudgeon-y old person, and, you know, in that last phase of life where I can just gripe and complain about everything. So I look forward to that. Yeah.
Wow. Why Hindi? Or you said you were learning Hindi?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, it is the native
Why
language
Hindi?
where I predominantly am at, which is in Jaipur. They also have a local language, this Rajasthani sort of, you know, kind of a slangy kind of form of Hindi meets English meets Punjabi meets a lot of other things. It's a really cool way of talking. But just to be, you know, I'm going to be working with schools over there, and want to be able to, you know, have formal conversation and communication and things like that. And also see myself living over in that part of the world, in parts of the year when I'm not working and things like that, probably for quite some time.
That's very interesting. The reason why I said Hindi, because it's like it's similar to Nepal, because they have a connection. The amazing, fascinating about India is that they have they have the capacity to learn so many language.
Yes. Yeah. So many different dialects, so many different things going on. But people are, you know, quite capable of just being able to speak anything, right? And everything over there. And it's just amazing how cultured and how beautifully versed those people are. So
What you ate their food, right?
did I eat
The
it?
Indian food? Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. And you know, I will tell you this, I can't do really spicy food, so it was really hard because some of it is so hot. It's so hot. And I was really struggling there for a while. And luckily, you know, they eventually started saying, oh, they knew I needed less spices. So eventually they started making food for me with less spices. It was still spicy, and people would lie to me and tell me there were no spices in it. There were spices in it, but I said, when I come
Oh
back
God.
this time, I'm going to make some traditional Italian meals and some other things for them to experience too, you know, so we're going to kind of trade off some of the cooking this time around. So.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
When it comes to like, do you like use sign language to speak to them, or how do you speak to them?
Well, no, I mean, a lot of people speak English, which is good. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, it might be really limited, but many people do. And then I also have, you know, my personal guide, who is a local, and you know, the love of my life, who is from there and able to translate and help me communicate and all those kinds of things. So, yeah.
It seemed like your journey is almost like it represent like Steve Jobs a little. You know, people say he's not a good guy, but he went to India. It seemed like it's like you see this multi-dimensional, like, in why Hindu? Why Hinduism? That's what I'm curious about.
You know, I don't think that I chose it in any way, shape, or form. I think it chose me, and it just pulled me in, called me in. It is such a beautiful religion, in one that is rooted in such amazing aspects of how we've come to be, right? Creation, how we were created, all those kinds of things. It is a religion that is deeply aligned with astrology and other things like that, right? Look at how they find out your natal charts, those kinds of things. I mean, it's just such a beautiful, well-rounded, well-grounded, well-versed religion, that is so old, right, and historic and rooted in such deep philosophical aspects, but yet, you know, somehow keeps up with the times, right? Knows how to move with contemporary aspects and things like that in some ways, where, you know, growing up a Catholic, I can't say the same for Catholicism. You know, I love Catholicism. I continue to practice Catholicism, but at the same time, even the church now is struggling to find where it has, you know, sort of lost itself in a way. It wasn't rooted in tradition. It was rooted in, I'm going to put my feet in the sand and insist this is how it is because this is how it's always been. But it wasn't always the most meaningful way of living or understanding people and the way that things were changing. And I think Hinduism does that. Hinduism is one of those beautiful religions that's deeply grounded, yet, you know, it's like my book is about the tree, right? One of the main significant characters in the book was the tree. And at the end of the book, we talk about how there are the branches above, but there's the roots below, right? The tree of life. And that's what I feel like Hinduism is about. It's rooted in it's grounded in its roots, but its branches are constantly evolving, constantly changing, and keeping up with people in that way. So.
Well, yeah, I was thinking about your Buddha, because you were what, sleeping under it, right? Something
Under the tree?
I can't remember what.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I fell asleep under the tree. There was that little metaphor to Buddha. Yes, you picked up on that, which is good. Yeah, yeah.
Because I was like, my family's into Buddhism, but
Yeah.
you're right. I fell in love with studying Hinduism, right?
Yeah.
Because it's who we are. It's
Yes.
who we are, because we lost touch with it. And because, you know, the part where I love it's about intuition, and we've forgotten it. That's why where Steve Jobs go to learn about intuition, because they go inside.
Right.
They don't go
Yeah,
outside.
exactly.
Hinduism is like not separate, right? So many religions try to separate you. Like the God is up here and it separate you from, like, but they make it whole.
Yeah, no,
Like,
and in chapter 4, that was a big part of the destroyer, was he kept asking Liv over and over again, you know, who is God? And she started talking about God as this separate entity outside of herself. And he, so in a very stern voice, yet in a very loving way, said, I will ask you one more time, right, my child, you know, what is God? Who is God? And she finally looked inside that space and said, God is me. I am God. You know, there is no separation. Separation is what causes suffering, right? Our illusion and belief that there is separation in anything. And there isn't. It doesn't matter if you're 7,411 miles apart. There is no separation unless you create the illusion that there is. And so this was the beauty of helping her come to a space of seeing that she was not separate from God, and that she could create her own reality, however she so desired, based on that. So, yeah.
thank you so much for writing the book.
You.
I enjoyed it. You're welcome. It's very entertaining, especially when you go to battle.
That's going to be book 2. It's going to be a lot of battle. So definitely I'm going to try to figure out, because she left that sword, right, with Sheba. So, is she going to have the sword again in book 2? We don't know. Are there going to be different methods of fighting? Also what's interesting is what do the kids do in book 2? Because the kids show up at the end of book 1. And will they be a poignant part of book 2, and how so, in really aiding the survival of the world and the planet as we know it? So.
Interesting. Where can we find you? Because the Instagram, right? The most where you do Instagram, right?
Yes, on Instagram, it's at Dr. Renee One Life with the number 1. So Dr. Renee One Life. My website is transcendentheart.com. You can go ahead and click on the Tell Your Story link. You can send me information, ask questions, whatever you wish to. And then also the book, The Unbecoming, A Journey Within, is actually available on Amazon in Kindle and paperback. So just go to Amazon.com, type in The Unbecoming with my last name, which is Mudrey, Mudrey, and you will find the book.
Thank you for writing just a easy book to read. It's not, because I can't, when it comes to reading, I'm so used to like self-help books, right? And
trying to digest that. It's like, ugh.
Yeah. But when it comes to like story, it's like Twilight, right? So huge, enormous book, and you try to like read it, but yours is way easier to imagine than most.
That was my purpose, was, book 1, just put something out there really fast that really got people interested. That was, again, very entertaining, cathartic as well, and will lead into other, journeys that'll be a little bit longer next time. But I struggled with reading as a kid, and I wanted to make sure that anybody who picked up this book could read it easily, digest it, and also get something out of it. So, yeah. But thank you so much.
You're welcome. Wait, you struggle with reading?
I did.
But you're valedictorian. How you struggle with reading?
I was valedictorian. I got a PhD, but yet, my dad was dyslexic, and I don't believe that I was dyslexic, but I definitely struggled with aspects of being able to, from a sensory processing perspective, being able to digest large amounts of text and being able to do something with them and understand them and comprehend them over time. That was really always a struggle for me. So my dad, who was a beautiful historian and lover of history and life, he used to just tell me stories as a kid, and that's how I learned best, and read books to me. So, I kind of learned better in that way. So I'm going to be turning the book into an Audible, actually, because I know a lot of people really would love to kind of just hear the story unveil, right, in an amazing voice. So.
Yeah. You talk about that, where your dad used to read your story in the book. Yeah, I remember. But thank you so much for your time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. Even though it's keep coming out.